Hey everybody, this is my long-finned German blue ram in my 20-gallon open-topped office tank. And right now it is feeding time. I put some crumbled up algae wafers in to sink to the bottom because the ram will eat flake food out of the water column and will definitely even eat the flake food off the surface. But it really seems to prefer pecking off the bottom. And I specifically wanted to show you all of these other fish that are swimming around in the bottom for a reason. So, yesterday I was talking about this tank and how warm I kept it. I've been keeping it at 31 degrees or right around 89 degrees Fahrenheit. And because of that, the water basically can't hold oxygen at that temperature. It holds it very, very tentatively. And so you've got to have an air stone when you've got your temperatures up above. I always think maybe 83, 84 degrees, anything above that, and you want to have an air stone going on in there. So I explained that the way I set my air stone up is right below the filter. So as the bubbles rise up, they get into the flowing water, and it carries that water throughout the tank, and I get a little bit of circulation, and then that way my gas exchange is spread out throughout the tank. And someone suggested to me that I could take my air stone and I could actually just stick it right in the back of my hang on the back filter, tuck it down. Where's my finger? There it is. Either tuck it down in here or tuck it down in there and sort of aerate the water before it even came out of my filter. And I thought that was a pretty good idea. And I decided I was going to do it. And when I first put it in there, I immediately didn't like it because it made a vibrating humming noise that was really annoying. But I wanted to see how things work out because I began thinking about it for a minute. And I began to question the wisdom as to whether or not that would actually work. And I have learned over the years that a lot of things that you think will work, or it stands to reason, or it just really sort of intuitively seems like that's the way it'll go, a lot of times that is not the case. And that is because there is far more things out there that I do not know about than things that I do know about. So all kinds of stuff is going on that I don't understand or that I don't know about, and so just because I think that seems like a good idea doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be. So I tried it out, and it turned out that when I came back in the room about an hour later, every fish in the tank was in the top 1 inch of water and swimming around. The first fish I noticed was my clown pleco that usually stays on the bottom and stays hidden in the caves, and it was right up against the water line. It was still trying to hide behind the filter a little bit, but its nose was literally at the water line, and all of the guppies and neons were swimming around in about the top inch, and the ram was maybe, swimming around 3/4 of the way up in the tank. So I know what that means, and that means you need to get on the tank fast because there's not very much oxygen in the water. Or it could mean that you've got gill damage being done due to ammonia. Your fish will behave the same way if ammonia is in there, because the ammonia will oxidize their cells in their gills, and it depletes their ability to exchange gases. And so even though the water might have plenty of oxygen in it, it's not getting into the fish's blood, and so they will behave the same as if the water has been depleted of oxygen. So if you ever see your fish swimming up near the surface, and you've got an air stone running in your tank or something, immediately start checking for ammonia, because that could be a sign of ammonia poisoning. Otherwise, it's more than likely it's going to be a sign of low oxygen levels. It's going to have all your fish up near the surface like that. So literally within an hour of putting that air stone in the back of that tank, in the back of the filter here, I had every fish in this tank was gasping for air up near the surface. So I immediately pulled the stone out and I put it back down where you see it now. And I sat down at the computer and started, rooting around on the internet. And I looked over after about 10 minutes, and all the fish were swimming around normal again. Literally in about 10 minutes, it was back to normal, and all the fish were behaving the same way as they were before. So I got to thinking about it, and it kind of makes sense. That's why I was sort of questioning it when I set it up, because when I started thinking about it, the first thing I questioned was the fact that the filter where all that water is swirling around and flowing back in there, there's already a lot of gas exchange happening, because remember, that air stone is not oxygenating your water. It is simply facilitating gas exchange. So in the same way you've got the CO2s coming up out of the water and you got oxygen going down in the water on your surface, every one of those little bubbles has a membrane, a surface to water interface, and that gas exchange is happening constantly in all those little bubbles. You really do facilitate a tremendous amount of gas exchange by having all those bubbles flowing up through the water column like that, but you're not oxygenating the water. You could only do that if you had an oxygen tank and you were pumping additional oxygen in there. All you can do by having the bubbles in there is make sure that the water is going to be as balanced as it can be with your gases. So what's going on in your filter area is pretty much, that's already happening. So adding some bubbles in there isn't going to make it any more gas exchangey. You're not adding oxygen to it. You're simply facilitating for the gas exchange. And you can see all this open water flowing across here and all the water swirling around back there. That's as gas exchanged as it's going to get, I think. So adding the bubbles to that water isn't really doing a whole lot. You take water that's down here deeper in the water column, you add some air to that, and you get it moving around and swirling, and you get all those bubbles. Another thing I thought about was the amount of time that the bubbles would be in the water. They wouldn't, well, I don't know. Again, see, there's a lot of aspects of this I'm not really sure about. Even though the bubbles would only be in the water for a brief period of time, there's a constant supply of bubbles, so it's still the same amount of bubbles. Although, I guess if you're looking at that many bubbles versus all these bubbles, it does make more sense. The deeper you put your hose down in the water, the more gas exchange you're going to allow for. So I thought about moving the air stone and putting it down at this end of the tank just to put some gas exchange down here too. But I'm actually happy with the way it's working out now, because my clown pleco, which is a fish that generally likes cooler water and needs a little more oxygenated water, it actually stays at this end of the tank by choice. It could stay down here near the air stone in this cave or whatever, but it doesn't. It stays down at this end. So I think we've got good enough circulation and gas exchange, and I think my system set up with the air stone underneath the filter intake is where it's at. I think that's just how this tank is going to function most efficiently or whatever. But I did notice within an hour of putting that air stone in the filter box that all of the fish in the tank were up near the top of the water, and even my ram, which isn't necessarily a bottom dwelling fish, but it generally tends to stay down in that bottom third area for the most part. It will swim around. Again, I've even, he even feeds off the surface often enough. If that's where the food is, he goes to where the food is, but as soon as it starts sinking, that's his preference. He goes down right to the bottom and starts pecking the food off the bottom as soon as it starts sinking down. So far so good. That was probably the closest thing I've had to showing any signs of distress since I've had this fish. I have spoken about it. It's hard with all the glare. The way I've got this tank lit up, it's with a floodlight right over top of the tank, and it just spreads the light out everywhere. And so unless you hold the camera just right, you're going to see my reflection and the glare off the room and everything else in this tank. It's really difficult to get a good video of this one without getting a bunch of glare. But I've been shooting some video. We're kind of following along with this fish as far as the nitrate levels in the tank and that sort of thing. So no maintenance or anything like that today. I didn't do any nitrate test or anything. We just did all that yesterday in a video. I topped the tank off. I didn't do any water changes, but I did top the tank off. And that was where the discussion about the air stone and putting it in the back and all that came from. So nothing really new to update you on, but I did do that experiment, and I thought that was worth talking about. So I'm going to give it a few more days. I don't think this tank is ready for a water change just yet. So we're going to give it another few days, and even though I have backed the temperature off, I don't know if I mentioned that or not. I was keeping it set at 31 degrees. Now I have it set at 30 degrees. And I think the reason I bumped it up to 31 was because this always seems to be 1 degree below what I have it set at, and almost always seems to be on. And so if I've got it set at 30, it always seems to be sitting around 29. And, well, as I say that, we jump up to 30. So I think that's why I bumped it up to 31. And what happened was I raised the tank up to 31 degrees, and it was really warm. It was still functional. The air stone and everything had everybody in there doing well. But as several people pointed out, the warmer temperatures increase all the fish's metabolism, which increases how much food they need, which also increases more or less how fast they age. So turning the temperature down a couple of degrees Fahrenheit or 1 degree centigrade, and now we've got, we're right around 86 degrees in the tank now. I believe 85 and a half or something like that. We're in that neighborhood, and so it's plenty warm enough for that ram without being, as hot as I can make it. I don't really see any point in making it that warm. So there you go. That's all I can think about to say about this tank tonight. So make sure you're subscribed. You never know what you're going to get with me. And then don't forget, of course, this is my 20-gallon open-topped office tank. So thanks again for watching this one, and I will see you real soon on the next one.